Hello guys and welcome back to our life. We are moving onward to part 3, or step 3 as this shows, so here we go. There was no denying it. Today was the very last day of summer. Tomorrow you were heading to class. Anxiety gnawed at your stomach. Going back to school meant handing over the autonomy you'd had over the past weeks. You had very little control over what you did at school or who you shared a class with. It was with a heavy heart that you chose your outfit for your final day of freedom. Life was going to be different. You had come to think of the summer vacation as the norm. But school sucked up the majority of the year, whereas the summer vacation was just a respite in the middle. So rather than being different, it was kind of returned to normal? What did your normal life really mean? You considered how fondly your moms talked about their summer vacations as kids. You dimly recognized that one year the pattern of school and summer itself would be over for good. It was hard to imagine. You'd gotten distracted, one arm still out of a sleeve. You pulled it through and put your mind back to the present. This season had brought about plenty of changes of its own, like Kyra's visit. Like Kira, I don't know why I keep wanting to call her Kyra. Like Kira's visit, though that too was coming to an end today. You had become extremely fond of her. The neighborhood was about to feel a lot emptier. You finished dressing, which was good. Cove would be there any moment. You'd agree to see his mom off together. Officially, the plan was that he would come over to bring you around to his house when she was ready to set off, but you both knew that you'd be hanging out for at least a little while beforehand. Kira's visit had troubled Cove when it first happened. It had been a sudden change, thanks to Mr. Holden's infamous tendency to surprise people. But once he was able to adjust, he'd been in pretty good spirits with her around. It was a relief for everyone. The next thought that crossed your mind was, You couldn't wait to see Cove, so you went downstairs to meet him when he arrived. You bounded down the stairs and your hand glided over the rail. You wanted to make sure you got there first. If you didn't hurry, your moms might answer it. It was only a few minutes later when the doorbell rang, as you'd chosen to stand beside it to wait for Cove. There was no delay in pulling it open. Cove was there, just as you had expected. Seeing you, he flashed you a bright grin.
Hey.
Hi, Claire. Hi. Smiling, you beckoned for him to come in and follow you upstairs. Back up in your room, you sat down on your bed and waited for Cove to settle in, as you knew he would. With other guests, you might have offered them a seat, but you and Cove were long past those tentative stages of friendship. Your room was as familiar to him as his own. You watched as Cove sat down on your desk chair, his preferred spot. He rolled it closer to the bed to make it easier to chat, tweaking the angle so that he was facing you fully. Once happy with the position, he leaned in towards you, hands held in his lap. His actions weren't the ones of someone who planned on moving from his spot anytime soon, even though you had an appointment to keep together that day. When is your mom leaving?
Don't worry about it.
We've got some time. She's still got a shower and stuff before she goes. She didn't want me to just keep hanging around while she was doing that. He lifted his head, his gaze drifted out through the window, and chuckled. I can't believe she's already leaving, just when I was getting used to her being there every day. He leaned back in the chair, a weary smile tickling his cheeks. She'll be back. He cocked his head thoughtfully before shrugging. He ran a hand through his hair before shaking his head, as if shaking off the topic like a dog whipping off water following a dip in the sea. Cove perched an elbow on the chair's arm and propped his jaw against his curled hand. There was a natural ease to his movements, a familiarity from the echoes of all the times before when he'd sat in that same position. This was a really nice summer. I'm looking forward to the next. Cove, still nestled cozily in your chair, smiled at your response. Do you think we'll see Miranda around school this year? Probably. She could be in one of our classes again. You hoped that you'd see her often. Hey, Claire, Cove! The sudden call from downstairs caught you both unaware. You'd nearly forgotten the world outside your room. From the guilty look on his face, Cove had done the same. Just had a call. Cove's mom is ready to go. If you're quick, she might keep the mandated motherly smothering to a minimum. You doubted that, but it was nice that Mom and Miss Priest had their strange sense of humor in common. Your eyes met Cove's. Wordlessly, you headed downstairs together. Each step on the way there was painfully slow, like he was trying to delay the inevitable. His whole body tensed, leaving the house, and Cove froze altogether before you both could cross the street.
Oh.
The door's open. Dad must be taking her stuff out. He swallowed hard. She's really gonna leave. You rested your hand on his arm. Cove looked at you like he was hoping you had a solution for how he was feeling, and all you could do was give his arm a squeeze for support. At that, some of the conflict wearing on his face eased a bit. Together you went across the street and inside his house, finding his parents in the living room surrounded by his mom's packed things. Hey, kids. Good timing. I just called the taxi.
Hi.
And hi, Claire. So glad I get to see you today. It was fabulous getting to know you this summer. I finally got to put a face to the name I've heard so many times. She winked and Cove pouted on cue over the teasing. I'm really happy I got to meet you too. Hopefully it won't be too long before we see each other again. Nodding, Kira turned her attention back to her boys. She patted Cliff on the arm with a warm smile, and then she enveloped Cove in a crushing hug. Initially, Cove squirmed to break free from her grip, but his mom was unfazed and kept him locked in place. Heartbeats later, he gave in and hugged her back tightly.
I'm so glad.
And I'm so happy this trip was a success. Cliff looked like he was bursting with pride. And then Cove stiffened. Kira loosened her hold on him enough to study his face, concerned. She spoke her next words in a whisper that had been meant just for her son.
What do you think?
Do you want to unshelve it? Raising an eyebrow, Cliff watched them carefully, his smile beginning to falter. What's wrong? Cove sighed and his gaze looked over to you for a moment, and then just as quick it was back on his parents.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Really?
Are you sure? I don't want to do it now. I can tell Dad later. Nervously, you watched the exchange with a growing suspicion that Cove didn't want to have that conversation while you were there. You wondered if you should offer to leave when Kira gave Cove a pat on the head.
All right.
You can always call me if you want me to be a part of the conversation, okay? I'll call. Thanks, Mom. Cliff still looked baffled about what Kira and Cove were referring to, but you watched as his shoulders slowly relaxed. You figured that he decided to wait for Cove to be ready to talk to him. And with Cliff's silence, things seemed to be settled for now. After that, it wasn't long before the taxi arrived. Rolling up in front of the house and in clear view of the open door, Kira stood up, smiling sadly. That's my ride. Yeah. The matching reply got a chuckle out of Kira as you all filed out of the house. Father and son went with Kira's bags in hand. Once outside, you spotted your family waiting by the street, and to your surprise, Derek was also with them. He stood uncomfortably, and he waved as soon as you noticed him.
What's up?
Hey, Claire. Hi, Cove. When did you get here? My dad dropped me off just a little bit ago. Thought I could visit one more time before school started.
Sorry.
You picked a busy time. Sorry. Derek couldn't even look at Cove. He nervously kept rolling a pebble with the bottom of his shoe.
Sorry.
I wasn't even thinking that your mom would be leaving today. I'm sorry, dude. What? You're not interrupting anything. You're always welcome here. It would have been sad if I didn't get to say goodbye before leaving. I think so too. It was apparent Derek would have preferred to have gotten there at a more opportune moment. He never liked seeming impolite, but their reassuring words soothed his worries. The tension he was holding in his body lessened, and he looked like he was feeling much more like himself. Bye, Derek. It was fun getting to know you. Bye, ma'am. Is there anything I can do to help? Nah. Don't worry yourself over that. We're just about set. In that short amount of time, Cliff had gathered and packed the bags into the trunk. Kira took one last look at everyone inside. All right, I don't want to keep the driver waiting. It's time to head out. The little crowd that had formed around started their chorus of farewells and well wishes traveling, but Kira still made no move to get into the taxi. She placed her attention on Cove. I'll call when I get to the airport and when I make it to Nevada. Also, you better call the moment you walk in the door at home. Otherwise, we'll be wondering all night if you got into trouble on the way there. I can do that. And could you call tomorrow too, so I can tell you how school went? Of course! I want to hear all about it. Kira put a hand on Cove's head and affectionately ruffled his hair one last time. She then let go, only to move on to squeezing his cheeks in her hands instead. Mom! I love you so much, baby. She was chuckling by the time she freed him and rounded things off with a small tap to the tip of his nose. Cove rubbed at his face with a grin. Finally, she walked to the car while waving and took her seat in the taxi. Cliff hooked an arm around Cove's shoulders and kept him close as it began to pull away. For a moment, Cove looked up at his dad and then wrapped an arm across his back.
Bye.
Bye, Mom. Bye. Travel safe. Kira rolled down the window and stuck her hat out of it. She waved again while blowing kisses at Cove and Cliff. See you again. Before she was out of sight, you decided to call out with your family members and hers. As you added your voice to the others, you watched Kira's smile grow larger. The cab turned down on the road and completely disappeared from view. Cove let go of his dad and took a few steps out into the empty street, still looking in the direction his mom went. He smiled quietly, deep in thought. You got the impression Cove was feeling better than he was earlier. He was finally content with the way things were. The summer breeze brought a sweet-sounding jingle across the way. It was the wind chime you had given Cove. He had hung it at the front of his house, and it had become a very familiar sound in this neighborhood. You jumped a bit when your mom put a hand on your shoulder, pulling you away from your thoughts. She smiled when you looked at her. This was a great vacation, huh? Summer isn't over until the second I fall asleep. No naps for you then. Can't risk you accidentally ending summer a few hours too early for the rest of us. Chuckling, you shook your head, amused. Cove walked back over to the group, still genuinely happy. Derek grinned at him welcomingly, and everyone else there smiled at him, even Elizabeth.
Well?
Ma clapped her hands together, bringing everyone's attention back to the present. It's almost lunchtime. I think I'll put something special together. Her eyes sparkled with a plan, and Mom smiled. I bet you could use some help with that. That'd be absolutely wonderful. Derek glanced between the two, his eyebrows furrowed. Is there something I could do? Your mom's exchanged a fond expression. Ma shook her head.
How sweet.
That's very sweet, Derek, but it's all right. It's not your job. Technically, your dad left you under Cliff's watch. You're meant to be taken care of by him, not doing chores for the neighbors. Mom laughed a little over her own joke, and you watched Derek look away, discouraged.
It's okay.
It's all right. I don't mind. He was a little bashful about it. You wondered if Mom's joke had just reminded him that he wasn't initially meant to be invited to lunch. It was getting a little awkward. Mom grinned sympathetically. Her comment was meant to lighten the mood, not bring it back down. Ma tried again to get things moving forward. Why don't you kids go have fun? You all can come back in about an hour. We'll make enough for everyone. Mom nodded in agreement.
Sounds good.
Another stunning idea, Lonnie. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a plan then. I don't want to cramp your style. I've got some stuff to work on, so I can be out of your hair this afternoon. You should come by later too. No reason you should be the odd man out. Mom seemed amused as Cliff rubbed his neck nervously. He grinned, a wavering but pleased smile.
Thanks very much.
I appreciate the invite. He looked over the assembled crowd with knowing glances. I can help too. With as many people as you're feeding, that's going to be a lot of food. Didn't you hear what we told Derek? It wouldn't be fair to make you cook when we're the ones who were inviting you in. Ma raised an eyebrow when Cliff waved it off.
Come on.
I insist. Derek would be missing time with his pals. This would be a break for me. I'm quite the chef. Ma and Mom exchanged further glances before Mom shrugged. And our tight argument. If you're sure, we'll be happy to have you, Chef Cliff. Cliff's grin widened and seemed more hyped than you'd expect him to be about helping with lunch. Cove shook his head, a fond smile on his face. Then all us grown-up people will be heading inside. I assume the rest of you kiddos are staying out? Maybe not all of them. Ma tilted her head, a silent question for Elizabeth. Your sister thought for a moment.
All right.
I'll stay with the kids.
That's fantastic.
That's great. Both your moms smiled at her, while Derek and Cove didn't seem to appreciate her phrasing. But with the plan decided, all three parents waved and headed for your house. It was just you teenagers now. Elizabeth looked at you and the others, a curious expression on her face.
So?
What now? You silently wondered if Elizabeth only stayed out with you to avoid getting roped into work. Then again, she could just genuinely want to hang out. You couldn't tell with your sister. Cove spoke up after no one else did to answer Elizabeth's question. Want to go down to the shopping street? It's been a while, and I don't think there's a lot of other things we could agree on. Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Sounds awesome to me. Unlike you guys, I haven't been there 1,001 times. It's new to me. Okay. You strolled across the road as a group, down to the beach and then to the left. It took less than 15 minutes to arrive, one of the conveniences of Sunsetford. Four of you looked around at the familiar shops, trying to see if anything caught your attention this time. Derek was the most enthusiastic. He checked out every stall with his eyes wide with wonder. Elizabeth and Cove were in good spirits as well. That's so cool! He ran over to a street magician who was currently doing a card trick for a group of enchanted tourists. Derek clapped when the magician showed a middle-aged man his card. Derek turned back to the group with a curious gleam on his face. What does it take to perform here anyway? Do you have to ask somebody, or do you just show up and start doing stuff? Who would you even ask? It's a public street. Hey, Miss Mayor, can I pull a rabbit out of my hat? Please, Flopsy is well behaved, I promise. Derek chuckled, his eyes searching up and down the scene. Maybe? There's a boss of the shopping street? No one does any of this around my neighborhood. It's just regular stores behind walls. It's different if someone wants a real store, but here I'm pretty sure people are just putting on their little shows whenever they want and do whatever. I don't know, can you do that? Don't you need like a permit for certain things to set up like certain stalls and stuff? I don't know about a magic show though. Not sure how that would work. That's so neat. Would we be allowed to do something too? Cove laughed and Derek began almost vibrating with excitement. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. What would we do? Well, I don't know what. Not yet. I mean, I just found out it's a possibility, you know? But there's got to be something, cool stuff. I'm sure if we think about it, we could plan a show that'd really get a crowd pumped. You felt like he could try this idea on his own. I wonder if I could do some soccer tricks. Do you think that'd work? I don't know yet. With some amusement, the gang continued to peruse the stalls. Elizabeth found some earrings with a dangling, badly misprinted globe that everyone laughed at. Cove picked out a blob as Iceland, but Derek thought that it had to be Greenland. This is a world with what looks like 9 continents. I think you're both wrong. No, it's Australia. The other 3 giggled at your interjection. Suddenly Cove froze. You stared at him and then tried to see what caught his attention. When you saw a familiar face down the way, it all made sense. Between the crowds, his bright hair stood out like neon green bowl in a kitchen sink. It was Jeremy. Jeremy slowly drifted his eyes down the street, and his eyes widened in mutual recognition. He definitely noticed you. Derek frowned and Cove tensed up. You couldn't help but remember the last time you'd seen Jeremy at Miranda's birthday party. No wonder Cove was already defensive. You looked away. You didn't want to even start with Jeremy's shenanigans today. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Her gaze swept over Jeremy without a hint of a clue. Jeremy simply scoffed to himself and waded deeper into the crowd of people. Derek relaxed and exhaled loudly. I'm glad he's not gonna start anything. He peeked over at Elizabeth with a teeny smirk. See, that was the mean kid.
What?
Huh? She still didn't get it. That first summer day hadn't made nearly as much of an impression on her as it did for Derek, but he smiled and waved it off. Just forget about him. I already have. He laughed and Cove smiled slightly. He seemed in much better mood now that Jeremy was gone. Your eyes wandered over to where Jeremy disappeared. You hadn't forgotten the day you met him, either. He was only going to be in town for a vacation with the parents he hated. That glimpse was probably the last time you would ever see him. You mentioned that realization to everyone. I don't think Jeremy will stay here with the summer ending. That might have been the last time we ever see him.
Yeah.
I guess. We won't have to worry about that guy anymore. Derek kicked at a little rock on the road. It clattered forward and then rolled under a stall. But I still think it's kind of sad Jeremy turned out to be, well, like he is. It would have been nice to make another friend. Cove shook his head. It was clearly not broken up over what might have been. Maybe he'll become nicer in the future. Elizabeth rolled her eyes at the strange farewell to the odd boy. Not interested in the slightest. She clearly didn't understand his impact, and at this point she didn't want to understand. Jeremy was unlike anyone you had ever met before. You thought he was kind of pitiful. You and the group moved on from the stall and from Jeremy. It didn't take long for everyone to return to the joking. You all enjoyed what little time you had left as Elizabeth mentioned the hour was almost up. The little trip had flown by and lunch must have been waiting for you now. Derek bounced on the balls of his feet.
Okay.
Come on guys, let's get going so we can eat. I'm starving. Homebound, here we go. Cove stretched one of his arms lazily. Let's go then. You looked at him appraisingly. You nodded at him. Then you followed Elizabeth as she took it upon herself to lead the way home. She walked fast, much faster than Derek preferred. She kept gaining a lead, and then Derek would jog back up to the group. With Cove's long legs, he had no trouble keeping up. You walked side by side with Cove. You kept close to your neighbor. You both chatted about things you'd seen at the shopping street, with Derek chiming in every so often. You caught Cove smiling at you a couple of times. He was happy you were spending time with him. It was a pleasant walk home, and in no time you had made it back. Derek got the front door and held it open for everyone as you each moseyed inside. The three parents were still in the kitchen. They looked up and waved. Welcome back, everyone. You made it just in time. I hope you're hungry. So did everyone have a nice time out? She gestured for people to take a seat at the table. Plates and silverware were already being placed out. You took your normal seat. Elizabeth sat across from you, and Derek took a seat to your left. Cove sat on your right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. It was fine. I had fun. Yeah, I really liked it. That's good in my book. Casually, Mr. Holden sat in the empty seat across from Cove. He smiled at you and all the other kids. Mom set down a platter full of water glasses on the table. She looked down at the gathering. It's a good thing we have 8 chairs. I can't remember the last time we've had a group this big over for a meal. Can you pass the drinks down to the other side? Make sure you all get one. Sure. Those close to the cups obliged and started offering waters around. As everything got set up, Ma chided Elizabeth to take her elbows off the table.
Now.
And you shouldn't slouch. She pointed to Mr. Holden, who was leaning forward with both arms on the table. Oops. I do that. Mr. Holden seemed unsure about all the sudden attention and carefully rearranged his posture to something suitable for a fancy dinner. He smiled sheepishly at Ma. Elizabeth rolled her eyes and Ma gave a level look at her. You shouldn't be impolite to a guest in the house, either. Elizabeth groaned, long and long-suffering. Ma giggled and Mr. Holden chuckled.
Not bad.
The lot of you could learn a thing or two from Derek. He has the best manners here. Derek blushed, but it was true. His posture was upright and formal. He even held his fork gracefully. His table manners, on top of all his attempts to aid your parents, made him the model of meal attendee behavior.
Aw.
It's nothing. It's true, though. You have been a lovely guest. I've noticed that, too. It's always nice when you stay over, Derek. Derek smiled and sat a little taller in his chair. And do you have anything good to say about our other guest? She looked deliberately at Cove with a teasing smirk. Or is there just nothing to say? Well, Cove is my number one, but he does still clean his hands by wiping them on his pants. Cove frowned at that and absent-mindedly brushed his hands on his pant legs. Your mom's laughed lightly.
There.
Elizabeth, you should know, after all these years, Cove is hardly a guest anymore. Cove smiled awkwardly. Thanks. You tease Cove for his bad habit. Don't think I'm gonna let that pants thing go. Cove looked over at the window, not wanting to face the truth. Everyone ate their meal together and continued to hang out for the afternoon. After the food, you and the others played a couple games and talked about plans for the upcoming year. Time passed by quickly, and soon it was time to part ways. Mr. Holden talked to your moms, and Cove drifted over to you, knowing that as soon as his dad finished up, he would be leaving. It'd be cool to stay, but we have some stuff to do before everything closes today.
Okay.
Yeah, bye. Could you move? I need the phone. Cove raised an eyebrow, and Elizabeth impatiently gestured behind him. Cove realized he was standing right in front of where the receiver was placed. He sidestepped out of the way and shook his head, clearly thinking Elizabeth was rushing too much. Your sister made a beeline for the phone and started dialing the number of what you figured was one of her friends. Knowing Elizabeth, she was going to be on there for a while. You, Cove, and Derek shuffled closer to the door. It seemed like Mr. Holden was wrapping up his conversation, so everyone started saying their various farewells.
Talk to you later.
See you later, Cove. We gotta do this again sometime. Yeah, see you. Cove turned to you and smiled slightly. Bye, Claire. You hugged Cove goodbye. You stepped forward and spread your arms wide. Cove only had a moment to react before you encircled him in your arms. Cove hugged you back tightly, and his chest rumbled as he laughed. Seriously, dude, we'll have to hang out later. I'm gonna miss you during school. He offered Cove a high five, and the two boys clapped their hands together. Cove and his dad left soon after that. Your parents started cleaning up the house, and Elizabeth was still chatting to her friends on the phone. It was just you and Derek left. He elected to stay outside in front of the house to wait for his dad to pick him up. You decided to keep your guest company, although he was originally Cove's visitor. A light summer breeze blew through your hair, and Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot. Thanks for waiting with me. He kicked at the ground, distractedly.
Well,
Dad's still gonna be a while, so do you want to go for a walk? Okay. The two of you walked down the street again, just wondering without a destination planned. It was quite a stroll, too quiet for Derek being in company. You turned to him when you had noticed that he wasn't saying a word. That was unusual. Derek always had something he could chat about. You weren't sure if you should ask about it. Somehow, you ended up at the old park near the beach. You glanced over to Derek once more, still expecting him to say something any second now. However, nothing came from him. In fact, now you noticed a frown creeping on his face. Derek smiled when he realized you were watching. At least his mouth was turned up. There wasn't anything that really felt happy in the expression. He turned away and the smile fell off of his face. His eyes stared intently at the ground and you raised an eyebrow. If you want to talk about something, I'm here. I'm a little sad. It's just, with school starting back up again, it's going to be harder to visit. I'm going to have homework and clubs and practices and everything else.
sucks.
It really sucks we go to different schools. His face screwed up and his fists were closed tightly together. This was really concerning him. What if we don't have time? You shared those worries. I was thinking about that too. We have hung out so much this summer, it's going to be really different not seeing you around as much. Derek looked up at the sky. It was orange and purple with little wisps of clouds scattered around. The plane flew high with a jet stream trailing behind it. Then he turned to the ground again. Derek's face was tilted far enough down that it was harder to read his expression. Hey, Claire, I actually wanted to talk to you about something, if you don't mind. There was a pause and you waited for him to finish his thought.
Sorry.
I was just kind of wondering, do you like guys at all? Like, would you ever want to be with someone who was a boy? Sorry if that's weird to ask. I could be with a guy. Okay, then he hesitated before finishing his question. So what I mean is, just, is there any guy you think is kind of cool that you like around here? Not at school or anything like that. He ducked his head further. You thought about it. Well, I like Cove. Derek raised an eyebrow. He didn't look at all convinced. I can't tell whether you're kidding around or being serious. I really didn't think you with Cove. Derek started to mumble to himself, sounding very confused. Maybe she didn't really get my question? Oh, so... Derek pulled himself together, somewhat meekly. He looked at you while he tried to project confidence. His posture was too tight for you to believe it. He was nervous.
Alright.
You know, thinking ahead and everything is important. You've got to get yourself a game plan and all that. It's good to make plans, especially backup plans. He babbled, all full of energy and forced gusto. Well, anyways, I heard about this thing where people make pacts with their good friends that if they don't find anyone else, then they get together. Together, like they get married and stuff. So I was thinking, since it's good to have plans, it might be cool if we did something like that. His eyes widened and he started to make frantic hand gestures. Just, then we'd never have to worry about the future of finding someone. We can set it like a whole decade in the future, forever from now. We'd have graduated high school and probably college too. We'd have jobs and be really grown up. I mean, we'd probably have our own places and maybe our own pets and student loans and cars. Derek babbled on for a while more. It was as if all the words he held in silence during your walk had burst out. Now, all at once. So yeah, what do you think? Do you like me? Of course I like you, but it's not... He had to pause, desperate to find a way to explain himself. Well, you don't have to think about that kind of thing right now. It's better to worry about all that later when we're grown up. That's why it's a good idea to have a plan, you know? And, well, honestly, I think you and me would work out the best for that. So... You accepted the deal because you liked Derek? I'll think about it. You accepted the deal because you like Derek. I wouldn't mind ending up with you.
Really?
Really? Oh, same here. Derek brightened significantly and started to bounce excitedly on the balls of his feet. Okay then, let's do it. He held out his hand as if offering a handshake. Officially, he repeated the terms of the deal. If in 10 years, Derek... 10 years? Jeez, what are we, like, 13, 14 right now? So... we'd be like 24, 23. Oh, if in 10 years I, Derek Suarez, still single, and if in 10 years you, Eclair Swedish, are still single, we both agree that the two of us will get together. You took his hand and shook firmly as Derek beamed.
Thank you.
Thanks, I feel better about the future already. I guess it's working out. He laughed and scratched the back of his head, and you could tell he was giddy about this, and you felt happy too. You didn't spend much longer at the park after that. Derek didn't want to miss his dad, so you both made your way back to your street. Derek's steps forward seemed lighter than before. After Derek went back home, you decided to settle in for the night, stretching your arms over your head and noticed that the living room and the phone were free. Well, let's call it cousin. You picked up the receiver and quickly punched in the familiar number while going to take a seat on the couch. Soon enough, after explaining the situation to the housekeeper, Lee answered. She has a housekeeper?
Hey!
Hi, Lee. Can you talk? Definitely. We practically have to. My gosh, can you believe it's almost time for school to start? What happened to our summer? School starts first thing tomorrow for me. Ew, and I thought starting next week was bad enough. Enjoy your last week. Oh, I will. I hope you'll survive your first day. Me too. I need a good year. Ditto. And the last summer was nice while it lasted, right? We were busy. Yeah. Fondly, you thought about all the best memories you made this summer. Lee was there for some, but there were still many you hadn't filled her in on yet. You reminisced about the moment of your summer. You began to speak about... when Cove's mom took you on a wild ride. Oh, one time Cove's mom had me and Cove go with her on this ride all over town. Why'd she do that? Just 'cause? Sort of. We got caught in a sun shower and she wanted to help us air dry, and it kept going from there. Wow, I've never been down this road before. We didn't stop until we got to the leaving sign. That far? She means business. We even got out and walked around late at night. That sounds so grown up. Like something high school seniors would do. It definitely was something you didn't expect to be doing anytime soon. Or maybe not ever. Let's talk about Lee. What was your big highlight of the summer, Lee? Talking to you is always the best part of my summer. Even though it was a phone call, you just knew that Lee was winking at you. Good, you laughed. Alright, okay. So a high point for me was when I took that trip with my parents to Europe. That was amazing. You and Lee continued to go over your adventures until you both were yawning to each other over the phone. At that, you decided it was time to say goodbye for now. You did have school to wake up for in the morning. Bye, Lee.
Bye!
Night, Eclair. Talk to you later. You left the phone on the side table for now. Looking at the clock on the wall, you saw that there was only about 10 minutes until your moms would be insisting you had to go to bed so you could be rested enough for school. You stretched your legs out on the couch and sighed in defeat, watching the minute hand change 1 minute closer to bedtime. You rearranged yourself, feeling restless, looking out the window. Startled Startled initially, you spotted a figure out in the hills. It was Cove. When the surprise faded, you realized it really wasn't that much of a shock at all. It was exactly something Cove would do. You opened the window, call out to him. Happily, you got up and strolled over to the window. You opened it fully. Hey, Cove! Startled, Cove jumped and turned around to see you through the glass. He quickly relaxed and waved at you. Then you went outside to talk to him. Strolling casually, you went over to the front door. When you arrived, you noticed how many fireflies were out that night. They drifted along lazily, barely minding your presence as you waded through to reach the top of the hill. Cove turned towards you as you approached, and you noticed right away that Cove looked happy to see you. Hey. Smiling shyly, you stopped in front of him, your fingers nervously pulled at the loose string hanging off your shirt. Hi, what are you doing out here?
Nothing.
Not really. He shrugged, seeming unhappy with his own answer. You stared at him, waiting for him to continue. Well, I guess I was feeling kind of weird about stuff, so I'm getting some fresh air before bed. I hope you feel better. His mouth pulled into a bent smile. He spoke so quietly that you almost missed it. I think I will. Cove let himself fall back into his butt and then all the way down, so he was laying on his back as he looked up at the sky. You sat on the grass. You allowed yourself to sit nearby. He had been lost in thought, or was possibly waiting for you to situate yourself, but he started speaking unprompted again.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for being kind of awkward when my mom was leaving. Surprised, you stared at him a moment. You weren't expecting that. I just wanted you to know that I talked to my dad about how I felt and things. It's okay now. You were genuinely glad to hear that, and it brought a small smile to your face, but your thoughts quickly wandered back to the first day you met Mr. Holden. Did his dad confess about that? From the way Cove talked, you guess he hadn't. So there was more Cove and his dad should talk about, but it was a relief to know that they had made a start. Now was not a good time to bring up what you were thinking, though. You could wait longer to say it. It was almost unbelievable how much of an impact he made on your life just by moving in next door. You couldn't even imagine what your days might have looked like in a world where you hadn't met him. Cove glanced back at you, waiting for a response, and you had no idea what to say. Then, still without a word from you, Cove shook his head strongly. What? It's you. Huh? He snickered before answering. He looked thoroughly amused with your reaction. That's what you do all the time, so I'm being you. So You felt bashful about his joke. Feeling self-conscious, you glanced at the ground and felt a blush burn across your face. When you dared look back, you saw that Cove was smiling apologetically. He wasn't trying to be mean with it. Honestly, there weren't many people you could think of who could tease you about something like that. Returning his smile, you realized there was no denying that you two have been around each other for a long time. Cove broke the quiet before it could fully settle.
See you tomorrow.
Hey, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, see you then. With a final wave, Cove headed for home, but you stayed there a few minutes longer. Your mind kept going back to this simple statement. See you tomorrow. No matter how much was changing around you, there was some things in your life that always seemed to remain true. The hills felt warm to you that night. Before you knew it, you were getting comfortable under the covers in your room. Your mind couldn't help but still be buzzing with thoughts about the future. You felt unsure. A new chapter of your life was about to begin, and no one could say what it was going to be like. Slowly, your eyes grew heavy as you drifted off to sleep, your mind spinning with wistful thoughts. No matter what happened next, you could only hope that you would make the most of it. You were ensnared in a dream when a noise from the outside world jostled you. When this happened, you just tried to forget it. The light clatter continued. Now that you were more alert, you could distinguish it as a tapping sound, quiet, slow, but persistent. Each beat was like being poked. You couldn't ignore it. You lifted your head from the pillow and looked for the source. Not much work was needed to puzzle it out. It was from the window. With that, you knew exactly what it was. From the cut of the light filtering into your room, it was too early for anyone to be awake, including the sun. It had barely hauled itself over the horizon, but that didn't stop some people, it seemed. You sat up in bed and opened the window wide. Cool air, not yet warmed by the day, tickled your face as it pushed into your room. And just as you'd expect, there was your neighbor, crouching on your windowsill. He was fully dressed, though not for school. He was wearing a wetsuit and a fond smile. Hiya, Claire. You stared back, blinking. So technically we won't be back to school for a few more hours. His voice was delicate, yet deliberate, each word a careful explanation. Classes haven't actually started yet, so do you want to hit the beach with me one more time this summer? You're crazy. Always. His smile widened affectionately. You rushed to get changed into something suitable while Cove climbed back down to ground level. Your limbs, still half asleep, struggled somewhat as you attempted to coordinate them into a swimsuit, but you got there in the end. Soon you were tiptoeing out of your front door, clutching a towel. Cove was already there to greet you. Your eyes met. Cove's gaze darted to your destination and back to you. You checked the door was closed, gave him a thumbs up, and the two of you leapt into action. Wordlessly, you began to run down the familiar path ahead, Cove beside you. The thrill of your illicit outing made you want to laugh. Not that you dared. If anyone in your family looked out and saw you, then the summer would be back to being over. One glance at Cove told you that he was exactly the same, holding back snickers for fear of being heard and caught. The towel streamed out from under your arm like a cape. You were running so fast downhill that simply keeping your balance and not tumbling down was a real threat. It just wasn't enough for one to make you slow your pace. For every step you took, the beach was a little closer and the day a little brighter. What lay ahead of you would arrive, and you were happy to meet it. Alright, once again we can do a little bit of changing. I probably won't do too much. Alright, I haven't changed that much. Alright, we're gonna go with Crush. Yeah. We're not gonna change anything here either. So. Alright. The start of classes ended the relaxed, free days of summer. It didn't take long for you to get back into the swing of the school year routine. Schedules and homework became the new normal. Derek wasn't around nearly as much. With school and after-school activities, there weren't many opportunities for him to take a trip out to your neighborhood. Sometimes you'd hear that he was at a training camp or something like that, but you weren't always sure what he was up to. Excuse me. But you still kept in touch over the phone as best as you could. The Jeremy kid did disappear after that summer, and no one ever heard from him again. Where he went or what he might be up to was a mystery. You saw more of Miranda around since you had hung out with her on her birthday. She had opened up to you. The two of you talked regularly. She was the same towards Cove. After a while, all three of you developed a real friendship together. More summers came and went like the waves on the shore, coming in and out. In your second year of high school, someone new started to visit Sunset Bird, a sunny girl named Terry Brooke. She was a friend Cove made due to them both being ocean-obsessed. Terry was more than glad to befriend you two. Someone close to Cove had to be good company, she felt. You were pleased to get along with her as well. Funnily enough, Terry was also extremely tight with Miranda, who she had known for even longer than Cove. The four of you were able to create a small friend circle. As for your home life, the Swedishes also had developments. Changing laws and public perception countrywide made it possible for your moms to openly wear their wedding rings without questions. Though they had a wedding years ago, it was only recently that the union was officially recognized everywhere in the U.S. That was a good day, to say the least. Elizabeth came into her own and stopped being quite as irritable. She no longer worried about perceived childishness as she grew up for real. She didn't even mind being called Lizzie again, although most people used Liz. She eventually graduated high school and moved out to attend college in another state. It was a lot for you to adjust to your older sister being gone. Liz never let you forget her role in your life, though, and kept in touch. Cove's relationship with his family improved over the years. Kira visited several times after that summer, and things became easier between the two. He was also closer with his dad than ever before. You knew they talked more, and that helped prevent a lot of friction before it could start. And Cove only continued to open up to his parents and to the rest of the world. He was so bright, he shone. He would willingly join conversations, make jokes, and put in an effort not to use overly blunt phrasing. Unlike his younger days, where he wasn't too committed to any interest, Cove focused his attention on studying more seriously as his schooling went on. Things had shifted between you and Cove. You had been friends for years, but the closer you became, the more you felt for him. You didn't view him as a purely platonic way anymore. It was strange to look back on it all. The future faded into your past, the future faded into your present, and then it was simply the past. Even the most fundamental parts of your life couldn't last forever. You felt that the most pointedly the day you would inevitably graduate high school. It was over, and you would not be going back ever again. From now on, what came next was your choice. You would be directing your own life. That was where you were currently. The summer after school had ended, the first summer of true freedom. What used to be a reprieve from the typical was now going to be your first step into adulthood. One fine summer morning, you took in what had become a very special scene, the whole family having a meal together. Your big sister Liz still hadn't lived at home full-time for a couple of years, but she arrived last week to spend the season here since it was an off semester for her. She wanted to make sure she was in town because you had now also graduated high school, so who knew how much rarer these moments would become in the future. You watched on as Liz laughed good-naturedly over a comment Mom made. Her Elizabeth-only mindset had only been a phase. Nearly any nickname was welcome at this point in her life. Strangely, even though she'd moved away, you'd lately felt closer to her than you had in a long time. You idly scooped up more of your breakfast and chewed absent-mindedly. You generally ate whatever. And the meal you had reflected that. It included just about everything your moms had made, though you often made your own food nowadays. With Liz around, though, your parents made even more options than usual. Your sister had been vegetarian for a while, and they wanted to make sure she had choices too. Conversation had gone on idly, without you fully taking in the words until your ears were piqued by Ma starting on a bit of town gossip. And so that's how I heard the news. All right, now stop burying the lead and tell us, what is this so-called news? Ma giggled as she cast a look across the table, satisfied that she had everyone's attention. Well, it turns out the Donnells won't be renting out the condo up the street as per Sunset Bird tradition for the first time in what must be nearly 2 decades. A chorus of gasps and shocked expressions were had all around. After the initial shock, your eyebrows pinched. Ma may consider them by name, but you and Liz always viewed them exclusively as the mean old couple who would yell at anyone under 25 who crossed their paths. Your Ma continued on with the story, spreading strawberry jam over a piece of toast as she did so. They've decided not to take big trips anymore. Friends and family will be visiting them at their home. That's nice for them, then. Have a good summer, mean grandparents with no grandkids, away from us. That's a relief. Be nice, kids. You don't want to end up like them, do you? You and your sister cracked smiles at the joke.
Well,
At least they won't be here to yell at my children anymore. Lonnie. And that blunt comment got laughter from all 3 of you. Engrossed in conversation once more, you continued to chat with your family until the meal was over. Step 3. 3rd time's the charm. As it went, once the food was eaten, the cleanup had to be done. Liz took the role of washing the dishes and passed them to you for drying and putting away. You had a set of cups in front of you that needed to go on the top shelf of the cabinet. I don't remember how short I think I was still pretty short. You had to stretch, but it was doable. You were an average height. That was simply your lot in life. You'd always hovered around the expected height for your age. Am I short for my age or tall? I think I'm short. You hoped you might still grow more. That was a struggle for you because you remembered how you used to feel so content about it when you were younger. Liz shook you out of your initial musings by starting up an impromptu conversation. She seemed to be voicing the thoughts that had been buzzing around in her own head. I have to say, going back for another semester this fall is pretty intimidating. You'd think after the first year or 2 I'd have a handle on things, but no. You stole a glance at her, still placing cups in the proper place. I guess it's only fair. My first run was pretty general classes, and year 1 of my architecture major was the basics. Now it feels serious. I have to actually know some things. The laugh she gave was flippantly airy. but the way she scrubbed at the plates held more force than necessary. I know you can handle it. How sweet of you to believe in me. Thanks. Your older sister's mouth quirked into a small smile. I'll be fine, one way or another. Oh, but I'm not trying to scare you away from college, if that's even your plan. What is going on with that anyway? You've had a solid plan set for a long time. You answered the questions as much as you were able and willing to. Liz's smile grew more reassuring as you did. You made it through 12 years of full-time education already. You can make your ideas happen, I'm sure. Sometimes it still felt hard to believe your public schooling experience was over. In the end, you had worked extremely hard, but you were rewarded with great grades. And you were just glad it was truly behind you. You'd achieved a lot and could take what you learned with you moving forward. Liz picked up on the silence her question ended up creating. She decided it was time to make a closing statement on the topic.
You're a good girl.
You're a good girl, Claire. Do what's best for you, and we'll be here to back it up. Thank you. At that, Liz happily passed the final dish your way. She moved the soapy, soaked hand as a farewell and moved into her next task for cleaning up job. You refocused on getting the last pieces put back where they belonged. You eventually moved into a new chore, but that was interrupted by the sound of your cell phone. Your phone was set just to vibrate. You casually picked it up from the table where you had placed it earlier. The phone was a couple years old at this point, having been a 16th birthday gift from your parents. They decided which model to get, but you got to pick the color. Ooh, rose gold. I gotta go with red though. You had a special charm attached to it, which was a heart. The screen lit up as you gave the little device a swipe with one finger. You were informed by caller ID that it was Lee. You weren't surprised. Despite having busier and busier lives and not living in the same town, you still had a good relationship with your cousin of the same age. Especially once the miracle of both of you having your own phones actually happened. She got hers first, though. Tapping at the accept button, you answered her call. A familiar, bubbly voice came through right after.
Hi.
Hey, Claire. Hi, Lee. I trust I'm not interrupting anything major. Only some cleaning around the house. Oh, then you're welcome for my call. A distraction from that must have been desperately needed. Yes, thank you, my dear cousin.
My pleasure.
She giggled, and you could hear the jangling of jewelry she must be wearing. Nothing amazing is happening for me either. I'm bored and felt like chatting. My morning shift ended, so I'm free for the rest of the day. Woo! That's good. You were off from your part-time job today. Like you, Lee had started dipping her toes into the workforce as of late. It made keeping in touch frequently even more complicated, but you both managed. What about you? It's been pretty normal. Cool. That's you then. So how's Mr. Cove Holden doing? There was a teasing bent to her tone. She was never willing to let up on what was going on between the two of you, but that name was incredibly familiar to your ears. Cove, your next-door neighbor for the past decade at this point. He was your best friend. At least you hadn't admitted you felt more than that just yet. Someday, you thought. Someday you'd know exactly how much he really meant to you. He'd know exactly how much he really meant to you. Are you even surviving without the boy being 10 feet away at all times? Or is everything right with the world again and he's back? No, Lee, he isn't here. Just like he wasn't here yesterday, or the last time you asked, or the time before that.
Sorry.
Aw, my bad. Can you blame me? Doesn't it seem like he should have made his grand return already? Plus, I want to visit soon, and he needs to be there, too. You could understand where she was coming from. This was certainly outside the norm. For the past couple of months, and the last few weeks especially, Cove had been going to his mom's place in Nevada. The two of you still regularly stayed in contact over texts and calls, but still. Your mind began to drift back in time to all the prior trips he'd taken to visit her. Almost every year he'd have to go away for a while, and then he'd be back. nice to have breaks away from each other. You kept an eye on his house for him while he wasn't there. It felt like the least you could do when you were younger, and nothing ended up happening, so maybe it worked. He sent you letters while they were in return. That's how it was in the past, but lately he had been trying to see her as much as he could before taking long trips to another state became too impractical to do. His part-time work could become full-time soon, or he could be moving somewhere else for school. Cove hadn't actually been entirely clear what his plans were after graduation. Cove was hesitant to speak on that, even with you. It couldn't be avoided forever, though. You both knew that.
Well,
Ahem. Maybe we should switch this up to non-Cove related topic? Yeah. The rest of the conversation rolled on. Not much longer, though. Lee had to go, and you needed to finish your responsibilities around the house. Both of you exchanged goodbyes, then you went back to what you'd been working on before the call came in. As you wrapped up the last of your chores, you were approached by Liz wearing a cheeky smile. I've got Mom's keys. Want to get out of this teeny town to do some shopping in a real city? I can do that if you want me to come. Good. I'm driving. Even though you could drive too, it was her plan. She could do it if she wanted. Go get your wallet and anything else. We're going now. With a nod, you made a quick detour to collect your stuff from your bedroom. You had money saved up from all the part-time work you'd done, as well as from gifts you'd received. After making sure you both were fully prepared for the long haul to the largest city in the surrounded area, you buckled into the car. It was a smooth ride there, with a light conversation about what shops to stop at and the radio blasting. The trip there breezed by, and in what felt like no time, you had gone from cruising down the road to cruising through the mall. Liz had her interests to check out, and you yours. When turning a corner down a new length of mall, your eyes caught on a little gift store. Your friends and family had recently given you many presents for graduating high school. You realized you wanted to get a graduation gift yourself to give to Cove. Graduation may have already come and gone, but Cove wasn't really around then anyway. You'd keep an eye out for something good, though you might have something nice for him at home already. Eventually, the mall was explored in full, with every shop of note being checked over. Rather than going home, you decided to walk over to some small stores nearby. Liz had many thoughts on that topic.
so
Honestly, malls are not a bastion of society. Even if smaller stores require extra distance, the brands are so much more. Then your sister abruptly stopped speaking and walking, right in the middle of the path. It was a good thing no one was behind her. She seemed to entirely shut off for a moment. Liz? The attempt to catch her attention was unsuccessful. Something else had all her focus. Before you could puzzle out what might be happening, she began to mumble out of the corner of her mouth. Hey, Claire, don't draw attention, but look. What? With a harsh whisper and a supple jerk of her head, she urged you once more.
hey,
Look! You followed her gaze as best as you could to a large bunch of colorful teens strolling down the same path. Okay. You faced back over to your sister with a confused expression, and when an unspoken question, unspoken question, what were you supposed to be seeing here? Claire, doesn't one of them seem familiar? She was practically bouncing at this point, so you looked the group over again, and this time you saw what she was seeing. Amongst the collection of strangers was a brown hair, gray eyes, and lots of freckles. That's Shiloh! Our Shiloh! From when we were kids! Yep, that was definitely him. I couldn't believe it. He's honestly just there. That's hilarious. That's incredible. Oh, but how do we talk to him? We'd have to pull him away from all those other people, and what if I'm wrong? Your mouth opened to reply, but she cut it off with her own answer to the question. I've got it. I'll shout the name Shiloh, and then we can act like it wasn't us. If he responds to that, we'll know without a doubt it's him. Claire, keep an eye out to see if he looks. Liz, can't you just try and talk to him normally? Likely without even hearing what you had to say, Liz put her plan into action. Shiloh! She loudly projected the word across the way and then put up on an act of casualness, turning her head away from the scene while brushing at the skirt of her dress. In a supremely awkward moment, you could only stand there as a tension in the air shifted to the two of you thanks to your sister's shout. But of the many startled bystanders who became altered to your presence, one of them was the boy. From a distance, his large eyes met yours. He looked. A wide grin took over Liz's face. She pushed the rim of her sun hat up and away from her face while swishing back around to greet her old friend directly. Shiloh! Waving, she stepped a bit closer to express her intention to meet, without really closing the gap. She wanted him to come to her. Who you presumed to be Shiloh looked surprised at the call-out. He stole a quick glance at the crowd he was with and hesitantly glanced back your way. He was trying to double-check something. Liz remained steadfast with her gaze trained on him, and ultimately he broke away from the rest of them. After a light-footed jog across the brick path, the young man pleasantly presented himself in front of Liz and you.
Hi.
Hi, I like your hat. Just that simple greeting had Liz giggling.
Hey.
Hello, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I'm Lizzie and that's Claire. We were all friends when we were little kids. His already wide eyes grew even larger, their gaze darting between you and Liz. His previously chipper demeanor faded into something delicate. I'm really sorry, but I think you have the wrong person. You could tell not being instantly recognized was going to make this exchange more of a challenge. Still, Liz was undeterred. It was a long time ago. You were really young. I get why you feel like that. However, I'm positive I'm right. You're exactly the same. That face, the freckles, how genuinely you try to phrase things. You're even still wearing a hat. Instinctively, he looked up at his headwear with creased brows, not making the connection on why the hat meant something to her.
Okay.
We know each other, okay? An uneasy smile settled on him as a silence followed Liz's speech. He was picking his next words carefully, and then the quiet was obliterated by a new voice bursting into the conversation. Shiloh! What are you doing? The rest of the group already left. A field trip is not a vacation. We are on a schedule. Startled, your head snapped towards the path. A distinctly unhappy individual with piercing magenta eyes, dark brown skin, and a sharp jaw stormed your way. He carried a cloud of authority with him, despite looking like he wasn't even 18 yet. Sorry, I didn't mean to ditch. Shiloh, whose name was now officially confirmed, gestured with a hand to add to the explanation of his absence as the stranger watched impatiently. They thought they recognized me as someone they knew, but it was a teeny misunderstanding. Liz, theoretically as well as literally, put her foot down at that, stomping in frustration and getting more childish the longer she was around her childhood companion.
Come on.
We do know you. Shiloh merely shrunk in on himself. The tone he spoke with was pained. Sorry. You honestly couldn't tell if he was apologizing for upsetting feelings of your sister, the upset feelings of your sister, or the palpable dissatisfaction of his new acquaintance. That in itself was very Shiloh-like. Oh, you know him? Is that it? The stranger spoke in a dismissive, scoffing tone, as if the words sounded so absurd to him it was almost amusing. Almost. But the sternness of his demeanor quickly reinstated itself. Well, do you know me? I'll tell you, I'm someone who has been forced against his will to be aware of what's going on in Shiloh's ridiculous personal life for a year. If the two of you have any importance in his general day-to-day existence, it would have come up by now. Don't bother trying to exaggerate any trivial connection you might have. It's not good enough. He's with us, and you'll survive without him. Now stop loitering on the road. It's rude.
Excuse me?
Excuse me? We're the rude ones? The high-strung ranting got an audible gasp from Shiloh, who finally started to speak up again in defense. Nate, that's really mean. It's also true. We're leaving. With that declaration, the unofficially introduced Nate indignantly spun on his heels and walked speedily towards where the group went, completely confident that Shiloh would follow behind. Oh, people can sure have bad attitudes, huh? Why can't they just try to get along? It's not hard. Don't worry, though. I bet you won't have to deal with him again. And I'm sorry I can't stay to talk to you, but I hope you have a really nice life.
Bye.
Bye! And that was it. His final parting words given, Shiloh left the two of you behind to catch up with his own life that he had to go live. Liv watched his exit, stunned, only to frown when it hit her that he was really gone as quickly as he had appeared. It happened so fast, you hadn't even been able to get a word in. She sighed, all the energy she built up released with the breath. I could have told him his last name was Fields, his birthday is October 30th. That would have proved it, but no. You couldn't help but laugh. You knew it wasn't funny to your sister, but it was just so weird and unexpected. Aren't you going to go after him? Liz merely shook her head, pushing off childish thoughts. I think we can leave it there, thanks. He's in the middle of a high school field trip, and it was already enough being able to see him. There's something reassuring about witnessing firsthand that he's still out there, enjoying his own part of the world. Though, if given the chance, I could definitely have a few words with him about the company he's got. She laughed, but you could tell there wasn't much humor to it. She was mad at that guy, even if she was happy to let Shiloh go. Maybe they're only with each other because of the trip, and it's not usually how things are.
Right?
True. We can only hope the same for him as he did for us. Have a nice life, Shiloh. Good luck out there. You'll need it. Liz smiled at you. It had the self-confidence you knew so well from her. Come on, little baby sister. Let's finish our own trip. Yeah. No matter how either of you really felt about the occurrence, it was something you simply had to accept. People you know just disappear and reappear in the most unexpected ways. The two of you enjoyed what remained of your outing until it was time to return home. By the time you arrived back, the sun was already beginning to set. You arched your back as you stretched your arms towards the ceiling. While it had been a good day, it had been enough activity to cover an entire week. Liz tried to hide a yawn behind her hands. You weren't the only one feeling worn out. I'll be heading up to your room. I mean, the guest room, since mine stopped being available as soon as I was out the door. Her tone was light. She'd had quite a lot to say on the subject when you'd first taken over her bigger room after she left for college, but there have been many trips back home for her since then. The room hasn't been hers for years. It was more of a running joke now that she continued to bring the topic up to this day. Thanks for being so gracious about giving it up. I had no choice. A small laugh was shared between you and your older sister. You better believe you'll be back in the guest room when you've got your own place and we're both in town for a visit. We could take turns. You'll have Thanksgiving, I'll get Christmas. What a reasonable and mature suggestion. I'll think about accepting it. She flashed her familiar grin and you couldn't help but feel glad she was back around, even if it was temporary. With that, she plodded off to the spare room. You were ready to do the same. Moving into a new space was your first opportunity to decorate from scratch. Aha! This is a fun little portion of it. I wonder if there's anything new. See, I always like the blue and I think the yellow. Green's kind of good though too. I never really liked the purple one though. So I'm going to go with green. Oh, there are no extras in this one? No, there's extras in the purple. Interesting. Okay, yellow. There's extras. Oh, interesting. Anyways, I'm going to go with green because I don't think I've done green before. And it's kind of a nice one. So a window. You can put some decorations in the window. She seems studious. We got walls. I think that painting's new. Ah! And floor. Yeah. You were really satisfied with the feel of your teeny part of the world. As your thoughts drifted, you tried to bite down another yawn. It was no good. Your bed was now lodged in your mind, and all you can think about was collapsing on it. You trudged up the stairs to your room. Stepping inside, you closed the door behind you, blocking the rest of the house. When you turned back around, you realized you were not alone there. Comfortably perched on the windowsill was someone very familiar to you. Cove Holden. How are you here? Surprise? Cove's tone was easy and relaxed. It certainly was a surprise. You hadn't expected him to be within the state, never mind your own house. He hadn't answered how he had suddenly just appeared back in Sunset Bird. though to be fair, you had been so astonished there hadn't been much of an opportunity for him to chat with you. Thankfully, Cove was only waiting for a good moment to start and began to explain.
So...
I got in about 15 minutes ago. No one was home, so I figured I'd come in the usual way. The window. A small smile had formed on his face. You were still staring at him, unable to blink in case he disappeared. You could still barely believe that he was really there, mere feet away from you. I left my bags in your backyard. I hope that's all right. That was when you truly understood. Cove had come straight to you upon getting back to town. You were his first port of call, taking precedence above all else. Even though you hadn't been in when he called, Cove had ensured that he'd see you at the earliest opportunity, rather than allowing his plans to change. The realization made you bashful. It wasn't news that you were special to Cove, but the way he prioritized you above everything else was something that flustered you. Cove dropped from his seat in the windowsill, landing lightly on his feet. He made his way over to you, and the smile still resting on his face. I'm so glad you're here. You pulled him into a bone-crushing hug. Cove squeaked as you crushed the air from his lungs. He awkwardly managed to wrap his own arms around your back in return. Oh, he's got the ponytail. Taking your shoulder for a pillow, he laid his cheek against you. I missed you. Even if he hadn't said it outright, you would have gotten the message from his body language. Cove was grinning widely, his raised cheeks burying his eyes, which gleamed like hidden gems. But he looked at you as if you were the most exciting treasure of all. Was it a good trip? Yeah, I had a great time. Cove told you about how his trip back had gone. His mom was doing really well. She had a project in the works that she was thrilled about. As a result, Cove was going to be sticking around in Sunset Bird for the time being. Things were settled as much as they ever could be. With Cove back once more, he felt at ease. Cove stretched his arm out over his head, his eyes on the window and the world beyond. The sun had set while you'd been busy reuniting.
Well,
I should probably get my stuff and see Dad. He glanced over to you with a familiar, expectant look. Want to come with me? You know I do.
cool.
Cove began to head to your bedroom door. He followed after him. The two of you casually went down to the ground floor of your house. In all the excitement of Cove's return, you hadn't even remembered the gift you'd prepared for when he got back. It would be the best to give it to him now before you left the house. Can you wait here for a little while? I got something for you. Cove's eyes widened as he tried to conceal a smile. He toyed with the collar of his top.
Really?
Really? I mean, you didn't have to do that. You nodded with some eagerness, trying to imagine how he'd react when he actually saw it. You bought something. It was a fruit bouquet. You didn't need to stray far from Cove to reach the fridge, where the present was stored. You pulled the cut fruit bouquet out and returned to Cove to present it. You knew the exact moment he spotted the gift as he broke into laughter. Clapping his hands, you waited for him to finish chuckling so he could speak once more. Happy summer. Happy summer. My dad is gonna love this. He pulled out a skewer to share with you. You accepted it gladly. I guess you're lucky I'm willing to share, unlike some people I could mention. You shook your head, knowing that the teasing was good-natured. You're really seriously too nice to me. You smiled back. You're worth it. Cove brushed his hands against the pale ghost of a scar on his arm. He was at a loss for what to do now. The clock ticked away, continuing seconds of silence. Once you'd had a chance to settle your thoughts, you figured you'd tell Cove the intriguing news. I saw Shiloh today. Shiloh? Cove repeated the name, his expression blank. From when we were kids. Cove pondered for a moment, then snapped his fingers. Oh, he was the freckly boy from the first summer, right? The one who moved. Uh-huh. I met someone called Shiloh. He looked just like Shiloh from back then. Well, he waved a hand, acknowledging the passing of time and so forth. Cove nodded understandingly. He didn't remember me. Then he had to go. Cove frowned. That's, I don't know. Too bad I missed it, though you knew him better than I did. That was definitely true. Not only had Cove known Shiloh for a shorter period of time, but he and Shiloh had never quite gotten along. Not that they were enemies either, just kids who really were only ever together because of other people they both knew. I wonder what Shiloh's up to these days. I don't have an idea. He didn't say much. Oh well. That was everything you had on that news item, so you moved on to the next big update. Also, you know the mean old neighbors, the ones who would always yell at us? He cringed, recalling those particular memories of the back in the day was not pleasant, even for someone as nostalgic as him. Yeah? They're not coming. They didn't rent the condo this summer. Cove's jaw dropped. You didn't blame him. The elderly couple had been an institution for as far back as you could remember, long predating Cove's arrival. Even now, as a teenager, you found your neck prickling as you walked by their condo, half expecting a scolding for breathing the wrong way in the vicinity of their vacation home. It was strange to think of that coming to an end. Wow. Cove blinked, clearly struggling with the idea the same way you had. I didn't see that coming. People being gone, people coming back. It feels like I've missed a lot. This has been a busy summer already. Well, you haven't missed the fireflies. They haven't shown up yet. Well, that's something, and we'd better not get left behind. There's still stuff to do. You nodded. The two of you headed out and traced the most familiar path you'd ever walked. A trip across the road over to Cove's house. It seemed that no sooner had the night begun than it was already at an end, and the dawn of the new day was soon upon you. The next morning, your belly was full of breakfast, and you were in a pleasant mood. You hoped the rest of the day followed suit. Later, you were meeting up with your friends, Cove, Miranda, and Terry, to go into town. It was all on short notice, but that was because everyone was just so excited that Cove was finally back home. Having a nice daydream? You blinked, pushing all your thoughts away and returning to reality. Your mom was watching you with a teasing smile. So what's on the agenda today? I'm meeting up with some people. Well, I hope you and your friends have fun. Don't get into too much trouble. She winked at you. You knew both of your moms wanted you to enjoy every bit of this summer before all of the big changes started. I'll try.
That'd be great.
But before you go gallivanting around the town, could you bring the mail in? I'm finishing up putting the dishes away over here. All right. Thanks very much. As soon as you were outside your front door, you couldn't help but see Cove and his dad standing around on the road. They noticed you too.
Hey.
Hey there, Claire. Hi, good timing. You should come join us. You ruffled his hair. Your action was quick and thoroughly messed his hair up. His face was red while he pouted and started smoothing his hair back into place. You noticed Mr. Holden was taking in the scene of you and Cove with a self-satisfied smile. Cove followed your line of sight and shot his dad an unimpressed look. For a moment, Mr. Holden seemed like he had a thought dancing on the tip of his tongue, but he decided to keep it to himself.
Oh.
So, what are you up to today? You held up the envelopes in your hand. I was getting the mail.
Right.
And we're meeting some friends in town in a while. You looked at Cove and nodded in agreement. Sounds like a plan to me. Yawning, Mr. Holden stretched his arms over his head. My boy and I have just been waiting around to see what the new neighbors are like. It was definitely his idea. I don't know how you're not interested in this. It's big news, besides. It'd only be polite to greet the new folks in town. Maybe it'll be a single dad and his son. Cove snorted some airy laughter at the suggestion.
Oh?
You think we'll have some competition? For several moments, Mr. Holden was unable to answer. He was still chuckling when he put his hands on his hips and tried to compose himself.
Nah.
Absolutely not. We're the #1 father-son duo in this town, and no one's changing that. Mr. Holden took one more glance at the currently vacant building and sighed dramatically. When he turned back to you and Cove, his whole body seemed deflated. There's no sign of them, and I still need to head over to work soon. Cove gave his dad a few reassuring pats on the back. Okay, I promise to keep an eye out. I can text you if anything happens. Really?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, only until I have to meet up with Terry and Miranda. Would that still work? With a wide grin breaking out on his face, Mr. Holden looked absolutely thrilled to have his nosiness enabled. That works. He moved to firmly place both hands on Cove's shoulders, fixing his child with a firm stare. Son, you are my true ally in this world. Mr. Holden stood up straighter, letting Cove go. He looked reinvigorated. Okay, with that settled, I'll go make some money. That's always been the one thing I do best. Mr. Holden headed off to the garage with a big wave goodbye. Cove smiled the whole time you both watched his dad leave. Mr. Holden was one of your favorite people. He always tried his best and was honestly just great. As soon as he was out of sight, Cove sighed lightly. Are you okay? Yeah, just not looking forward to waiting. Guess I'll be hanging around the street a while. I can wait with you. Why don't I stay and see the new neighbor and keep you company? Curiosity about the new tenant was getting the better of you, and you figured that the wait wouldn't be too much longer, and besides, you just couldn't leave Cove. Really? Of course, I like keeping you company, remember? He stared at you a moment, smiling softly and thinking about his response.
Me too.
I like that too. Cove put his hands on your shoulders, gripping you solidly, but not enough to hurt. His eyes fixated on you just as firmly. He was serious. Eclair, you're my true ally in this world. That got a fair amount of chuckles from you. He grinned, the stoicism fading into amusement.
Thank you.
You're always good to me. I can't help myself. Yeah, well, good then. I don't know what I would do without you. The smile on his face reached his eyes, and it made you feel electric. And then he let go of you. Cove stepped over to his front porch steps, lazily taking a seat and leaning back on his arms. Our watch begins. Nodding in agreement, you joined Cove on the front porch steps. You both sat there in a comfortable familiarity as you settled in for the waiting game and the new tenants. The neighborhood was quiet, and you sighed contentedly, closing your eyes and feeling the light breeze. The only sound you could hear was the familiar jingle of Cove's wind chime. After all these years, it was still there, adorning the entrance outcropping of his house. Eventually, you both perked up at the sound of a car. A taxi followed the noise, turning into your street. Cove's eyebrows raised at that sight, and he sat up straight on the stoop.
Oh?
This has to be them, right? I hope so. Now that they were here, you couldn't help but feel just a bit curious. You wondered what kind of person would be living in the neighborhood for the summer. The taxi pulled to a stop as you expected in front of the now empty condo. It was on the same side of the street as your house, a few buildings further up. Without getting to his feet, Cove tried leaning and tilting his head to get a view of the passenger door as it opened. The single occupant exited the cab. Huh? You could feel what Cove was in that moment. After the last renters, this new visitor was definitely not exactly what you would expected. It was a young man, had to be close to your own age. He was dressed fully in an electric black, white, and gray outfit. Even his side-swooping hair matched the scheme. The only other pop of color was from something that couldn't easily be fashioned into submission. A pair of dark brown eyes, which you caught when he looked over at his audience. Hello, folks. Who might you be? We're the neighbors. The smile already prominent on his face curled further. It was cocky, but you didn't get the impression it meant something adverse. Hallelujah. You and Cove shared a familiar look with one another, bewildered even further. The color-coordinated man left it there, however, and with a firm click, he shut the door of his ride. Then he turned his back to you to retrieve a large, unsurprisingly black suitcase out of the trunk. Continuing on with his own business, he strolled forward, lightly tapped on the driver's side window with his knuckles, asking for them to roll it down. When it opened, he leaned down and rested his arm on the edge. You assumed he was thanking the driver for getting him there, considering he slipped them a tip during the brief chat. They shook hands, and then he pushed himself up and away from the taxi with both arms, giving the driver room to leave. The taxi pulled away, rolling carefully down the road and out of sight, around a corner. The new renter had officially arrived. He left his suitcase on the ground, out of the way of the street, and sauntered over your way with the confidence of someone who had been invited to join. Cove finally stood up to greet this person. You followed suit.
Excellent.
I'm Baxter Ward. It's excellent to meet you, neighbors. You were standing on the side he was approaching from. When Baxter got close enough, he offered his hand to you first. You shook it. Baxter gripped your hand firmly to give a satisfying shake. I'm Eclair. Hello. It's nice to meet you too. Hey, Eclair. I'm quite keen on getting to know you better this summer. We could be good friends. From your other side, Cove made a sudden sputtering noise. And you are? He lifted his hand out to Cove next. Cove shook his hand, still eyeing Baxter carefully. I'm Cove. Baxter's whole demeanor lit up for unknown reasons, his eyes shone as he studied Cove for a moment. Now wait, is that a nickname or your real name? It's just my name. Cove spoke mildly, having given that explanation many times in the past, but it clearly charmed Baxter all the same. He tossed his head to one side with a laugh. Your parents knew exactly what they were doing. I can't imagine a more fitting name for the face I'm seeing. Cove. That's gorgeous. It's really not. No, I agree. It suits you.
Not bad.
Nice to see someone else knows. The impact might have faded for you living with this long, but I promise to the onlooker it's a knockout. Cove couldn't face either of you after that. His cheeks were quickly turning bright red with embracement. You noticed that Baxter looked apologetic over Cove's increased discomfort. I'm sorry, it wasn't intended to mean more than it did. I like your name, but you don't have to mind that. I'm patently against stepping on anyone's toes. He chuckled to himself. It seemed like there was some extra meaning hidden there in his words, and you noticed that Cove raised an eyebrow, picking up on that too. Baxter didn't even open his eyes to see your face to know he had some filling to do. He stood up straighter, striking a slight pose with the position of his feet. I'm a ballroom dancer, hence the phrasing. Oh, I didn't know much about dancing. I don't know much about dancing, but that's pretty cool. It's not hard once you get the basics down. Cove didn't look convinced at all. Baxter took that as a cue to keep talking.
Wow.
Well, he grinned in a way that was rapidly becoming familiar to you. If either of you ever looking for a partner, I'm available. Cove frowned at the overt forwardness. Thanks. I'll pass, I think. You didn't answer the question. Baxter nodded understandingly and let the subject go. After that, there was a lull in the conversation, and Cove attempted to fill it. What made you decide on Sunset Bird? Oh, yes. Well, my parents rented a condo, so I had a place to stay while I'm off for a semester from college and not living in the dorms. There was a playful glint in Baxter's eyes as he continued.
Honestly.
Ideally, they wanted to send me somewhere that wasn't too exciting, but lucky for me, they picked the wrong street, considering the two of you live here. Cove was practically reeling over how Baxter found a way to fit comments like that into every single topic thus far. Why do you keep doing that? You don't know us, but you talk like you already do. Cove spoke, firm yet genuinely confused, and Baxter smiled cautiously. I don't feel the need to keep words of praise to myself, and when I say something, I mean it. Plus, what's the point of spending my off semester alone? The best part of being somewhere new is getting to interact with new people. Am I honestly the first person who's acknowledged you're attractive and intriguing people? True, you're hidden away in this teeny tourist trap, but still. Baxter crossed his arms. After studying your face a few more seconds, he decided to continue. Am I only trying to score a hookup or get a romantic fling started by saying those things? No. That isn't the point of speaking well of others. I was raised better than that. Though, would I be fussed if that's what my words led to? Also, no. I'm flexible. Not a surprise. I can back off with the lines if you don't like the attention, but I would like to be friends if we can. Cove wasn't sure how to respond. He glanced at you, and he continued to look at your face when he spoke. Thanks for answering. I'm not interested in any of that with you. Maybe not the friend thing, but the other part. I appreciate it if you didn't do that with me. I'll keep it in check. Glad we're working things out. Shifting his weight to his other foot, Baxter tried to move forward. So, since you're both already out here, did my arrival interrupt anything? Definitely not. You told Baxter that you were both waiting to see who's going to move in. We wanted to see who was coming to the neighborhood. That's why we were out here. Baxter laughed at that, immensely pleased with your response. I'm getting a reputation in this town already. Not bad. Well, if either of you are free, I'd be thrilled to hang out this summer, but we can save the scheduled talk for later. I should get my things inside. He gave a small nod at the head and flashed you both a dazzling smile.
Goodbye.
Goodbye for today. Bye. Cove gave a small wave as well. Bye. Baxter then turned on his heels and strolled back to his suitcase, picking it up and bringing it to his condo. You and Cove were silent as Baxter unlocked the door and disappeared inside the house. With him completely out of the scene, Cove let a long breath.
Well,
I don't know how I'm gonna explain that guy to my dad. You burst into a fit of laughter, trying to imagine the conversation. At least the job is done. We saw the new neighbor, and now we can go meet up with Terry and Miranda. Yeah, we should get going. You gave Baxter's condo one last glance over your shoulder. You were looking forward to seeing more of him. Baxter was different, but you liked him. Smiling, you hoped that he would become a good friend this summer. Turning your attention back to Cove, you pushed all thoughts of Baxter aside. You both started making your way towards town. A little while later, you and Cove reached a main street in town. All of a sudden, you stopped walking. What's wrong? I think I felt my phone vibrate. You dug your cell phone out and looked at it with a satisfied grin. There was a new message. You opened the new text from Miranda, and all you saw was, "I can see you." Immediately from where you stood, you started swiveling your head around. You couldn't spot Miranda anywhere, but she did send you more messages. I see you're looking. Where are you? The message was sent, and you were back to looking around, scanning for any sign of movement and familiar faces, but they were still invisible. Cove looked at you carefully, raising an eyebrow. You sent your own joking text. If you want to keep hiding, Cove and I can just go do our own stuff without you, is what you decided on. You smirked, hitting send on that message. Cove looked at you curious, raising an eyebrow. What's happening? Before you could even begin explaining anything to Cove, you both snapped your attention to the yelling from across the street. And there you saw Miranda and Terry coming out from behind the back side wall of the grocery store. They both started waving wildly to draw even more attention to themselves. Cove took a step in their direction, grinning. He put his hands around his mouth to better project his message across the street. Hey! Laughing and arm in arm, the girls stopped only to look both ways and then rushed across the empty street.
Hi.
I hope you weren't waiting too long.
Hey, buddies.
Hey, buddies. Hi. Hey, I'm so happy to see you two. Now that they were here, their joke on you was already long forgotten in your mind. Terry and Miranda giggled, smiling wide at your declaration. Terry then closed the distance between her and Cove and crushed him in a painfully tight hug. You're finally here. It's been so long. What took you? He did his best to eke out a reply with his chest being compressed.
Sorry.
Eventually, she let him go. Terry looked at him with a beaming smile, but Cove was distracted, rubbing his arms. Standing there, Miranda shifted her weight to her other hip. She watched Cove patiently with a bashful smile. Welcome back. Thanks. It finally felt official. Everyone was together in one place. From here, you weren't sure how often you would have another afternoon like this again. They didn't either.
So?
Cove? Terry poked Cove square in the chest. You're gonna have to get me your schedule by this time yesterday.
No way.
Not really possible, Terry, but I can say as soon as I know. So far, work hasn't said anything, but I can tell you I'm busy with Orca activities. When Cove wasn't at his part-time job or pursuing his academic interests, he volunteered for the Ocean Restoration California Affiliation, Orca. The group focused on cleaning up beaches and removing pollution from the ocean. Cove always loved the sea. It didn't surprise you one bit when he started getting involved with them. It was Cove's activity. Their big smash event for the year is coming up, right? Yeah, there's not that much more to do before then, but I'm kind of looking forward to the fundraising push. You nodded, wondering how the event would turn out this year. I know you can do it, and even if it goes really bad, I'll just look good on it'll still look good on a college application at least. That's true. Hey, guess what else? We don't have to stand here to say stuff. Let's go. I would like a meal now. Perking up, Cove nodded in agreement. Excited by that plan, he smiled. The four of you headed into town, happily chatting the whole way. The only decision left to make was where exactly to stop and eat. The rest of the afternoon and evening passed by in a blink of an eye. When night fell, it was time to head home, and you parted ways with Miranda and Terry. You and Cove reached your neighborhood without event. It was late enough that your out-of-the-way street was dark and silent. You were walking tiredly after such a long day. Here we go. You yawned, stretching your arms high over your head. It was taking a lot of mental focus to keep up and walk alongside Cove. As you did so, you peered at his face out of the corner of your eyes. You wondered why he felt so distant to you. It was out of character. For a while, Cove silently stared ahead and left you alone with your own thoughts. It surprised you when you did hear his voice all of a sudden. He still wouldn't look at you.
Bye.
It feels weird coming back to the neighborhood and trying to get into things like they're the same. And they're not. They've changed. They're still changing. Your mouth felt uncomfortably dry all of a sudden. It was true. The things that kept the people you knew together were starting to disappear. Each person had to make their own priorities and their own path now that it wasn't set for them. You thought about your own immediate future. You were still set on that for yourself. You wanted to work part-time, to focus on time that's not school or work, and that was the basics. For your career, you thought you'd start your own business. Then that was all. For yourself, you wanted to take some time just to relax, work on self-improvement on your own, and that was all. And for that, you wanted to travel around to different places, stay local. Go abroad. It'd all be happening so soon. You started to prepare for what was coming. And Cove was the only person who knew. Now you wondered what Cove had in mind. You'd heard him consider some things for his future, but it was never anything that would have counted as a real plan. Making it back home, you both stopped in the middle of the street. Cove sighed. Cove looked at the ground for a moment, his mouth trembling, trying to settle on the right words to say. So you're planning on doing self-improvement and stuff abroad? You nodded. Your stomach felt like it was twisting into knots. Cove closed his eyes and nodded while he composed his thoughts. He looked at you when he lifted his head. I decided on something. What kind of? He smiled slightly and rubbed his arm, and then his expression grew more serious. I'm not going to decide on a school or a career. Not this summer. I'm going to stay here, at least in Sunsetburg. I'll probably move out of my dad's place. I'll keep working my job, keep doing my volunteer stuff, and everything else.
I don't know.
Maybe I'll know what I want for myself by fall, or next year, or maybe I'll never have a plan. Life will continue on with whatever's happening. I'm not going to crush myself trying to have everything figured out by a timeline that someone else has set. I just can't do it. His brow furrowed, and his tone was tense. It was clear how much expectations were weighing on him. I know that's not very exciting, but it's the best I can do right now. He laughed self-diversively, but with the way his face looked, you thought he actually wanted to cry. You looked at him deeply. Okay. You felt like you should have anticipated that Cove was going to continue doing things his own way, but that didn't matter now. You were going to accept his decision. He exhaled, releasing some tension in his shoulders. Thanks for hearing me out on this. You knew him well enough to know that Cove wasn't feeling completely better about the way things were. No matter what's happening, I want you to know that you won't ever lose me. I won't really be gone. I'll still be there for you the best I can, whether it's long distance or whatever else. Cove's whole expression softened. His lips pulled into an affectionate smile.
It's okay.
Hey Claire, you deserve to have everything you want in life. I want you to get everything you want in life. That flew out of your mouth immediately, but you meant every word. His mouth pulled into a delicate grin. Looking at you fondly, Cove took a step closer, and he placed a hand on your shoulder. The warmth from his proximity helped you relax. He spoke to you softly, wholeheartedly. He meant every word. Things are hard right now. It scares me, but it'll be okay. It'll be more than okay. Now that things are up to us, we can make our lives better than they ever were. You felt better after his reassurance. Whether Cove realized it or not, he said exactly what you needed to hear. He was right, and you almost felt excited, wanting to know what kind of future was waiting for you a few years from now. Deeply, you met Cove's gaze. You nodded. At that, his expression morphed into a look of careful confidence. Clearly, he was still struggling with this topic, and you were wondered what else might be on his mind. This was a start, I think, but it's not over, is it? We'll have to keep talking about it going forward. Yeah. Cove softly reiterated his promise. It'll all be okay. We'll still always be there for each other. Is that good with you? It is. Cool. That's cool. I'll see you tomorrow, Claire. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night. He pulled you into an unexpected hug. It knocked the breath out of you, yet couldn't have been more reassuring feeling. You returned his embrace and stayed that way for as long as you could.
Good night.
He finally let go, giving you another smile. Then Cove started walking away, but you remained there, frozen in the middle of the street. You watched him and wondered, how many more times will he be able to say that he'll see you tomorrow? You hoped for countless more times. Finally, you turned towards your own house. You vowed to yourself that you would make the most out of every moment you had this summer.